Hello, I have to be quiet because everyone in my house is asleep, but basically I did my project on how the rapidly rising tuition rates of colleges across America can be explained by conflict theory. So basically, as most of us know, college in around the 1950s, 60s, most of the 20th century was considered very optional, and only those who were looking to get very high-paying jobs such as that in medicine or law really went to college. And even then, when they did, it was relatively affordable and could be paid off easily after one entered the workforce. And that brings me into my next point, which is that jobs were very easily attainable back then, which meant that the prerequisites for getting a job were essentially graduate high school, where nowadays the population has doubled, which means that there's so much demand to get a job that they had to raise these prerequisites, and now college degrees are required for almost any job, which means that those who want to go to college would have to. And now that the prices are almost 3 times as much as they were back in the day, it's relatively unattainable. So for my paper, I decided to use University of Southern California as my example school because I felt like using LMU would be a little too personal. So basically the data that I collected was that in 1970, the annual tuition for USC was $2,002, which I converted it into today's dollars, and it would be closer to $14,300, which is not that bad considering in 2016 the annual tuition was $51,442. So I did some calculations and I took the current minimum wage, which in America it's $7.25, and I calculated to see how many hours one would have to work with said minimum wage to afford 1 year of tuition. In 1970, that would be about 1,973. However, in 2016, that would be 7,069 or 96. And that is about 3.5 times the amount of hours you would have to work in 1970. But the minimum wage isn't really increasing, and that seems to be the problem. So for my methods, I chose conflict theory because I felt it best described the situation. You know, at the end of the day, it is a competition for resources. And while jobs are getting more and more scarce as the population goes up, the colleges realized that since their degrees are now required to get a job, that they could raise their prices astronomically high to profit as much as they could because now they're more in demand. I didn't go with functionalism because this particular issue doesn't really have to do with functionalism. It's more of an issue of people getting denied the opportunity to play their part in society versus people not playing their part in society. And I also didn't choose symbolic interactionism because this is a very large-scale problem, and symbolic interactionism has to do with more like one-on-one type things. So the keywords that I chose were credentialism, which is the term which means to use your education as a way to show your merit, which is what a lot of people do nowadays. By showing their degrees and job interviews, it makes them stand out and it gives them more of a chance to get a job versus someone who doesn't have a degree or higher education. I also used structural unemployment, which is the term to mean when there are more people looking for jobs than jobs available, which is very much the situation now, which is why there's so much competition for them. And I also used social placement, which is using education to move up a socioeconomic class, which is what a lot of people can't do now because college is so unaffordable. And I also want to address my biases and limitations. So for the bias part, I am a college student who is generally middle class trying to afford tuition, so this definitely does apply to me, and I might be a little biased to say that college is too expensive. And as for limitations, I did only use an example from one school, even though I am aware that this is a national issue, but I couldn't really collect data from every single university in America, so there are going to be some limitations on the credibility of my argument. So in conclusion, I don't really see this improving that much. I know I probably should have had a positive take on it, but I don't see colleges lowering their tuition anytime soon, and I also don't see minimum wage being raised anytime soon, but that would have to be the solution to make higher education more attainable for people. So yeah, that was my project, and I hope you enjoyed.